So now we're live. We are live. Hi, Brennan Meister. Okay, we're live in Mount Shasta. This is, I keep losing herding cats. What are we here for? Finding out what you're here for. That's actually a very good answer. Ding. You get a ding on that one. This is the Toltec Discussions with Golden Eagle, and we're starting something new tonight. Whether you're dealing with the Toltec work, any other form of shamanism, or any other legitimate ism, there is one major task that's required. Not only one, but there is one major task that every legitimate ism requires of you, and that is to know thyself. You have to know your own nature. You came in with certain skills. It's part of your personality. It's part of your genetic makeup. It's part of your cultural makeup, and that all molds you. And along the way of dealing with, watch the light stand, learning to navigate a culture or a society or your tribe, we pick up baggage. And that baggage weighs us down. If you want to think of baggage as an aberrant frequency superimposed on your core frequency, then we have to get rid of that somehow. Those frequencies and that baggage, if we try to hold on to them, will prevent us from passing through the gateways, through the filters, if you will, into the higher spaces, the higher planes of the macro dimensions that we need to access to find out what our true purpose is and how to accomplish it. All the ancient esoteric schools refer to this as a process of knowing thyself. You can't improve things about yourself if you don't have the deliberate honesty to do a self-assessment and find out where your needs to improve are, and then fix them. If you hide behind that truth or hide from that truth, then you will never fix your flaws. You will never polish those rough facets of your gemstone. You will never break off the superfluous bits that aren't needed any longer. Does everyone know how they make, when they cast things in a mold, whether it's a metal statue or plastic, like Tupperware? You know, they have these two things like a clamshell, and then there's a hole, and they inject the plastic or they inject the metal, and it fills it up, and then there's another hole somewhere else, and when it starts oozing out there, then you know it's full, and you stop putting more liquid material in there, and then you wait for it to cool down and set. So that's in the world of engineering and metallurgy, that's called a forging. And so when it's cooled and hardened, You open the mold and here's this thing. But then you notice that there's a line that goes around it, right where the two halves of the clamshell came together. There's little spurs that stick off where you injected it and it oozed out. So this thing isn't done, right? You have to break those remnants of the creation process off and polish that down. And then sometimes the forging gets you something raw in its crude form. But then it has to be polished or machined or put grooves in it or something like that to make it a finished product. So what I'm describing about the work we do on ourselves can be likened to that process of taking the forging, which was the way we are in our crude and natural state. And then we polish ourselves, we upgrade ourselves, we cut off what isn't needed, we grind grooves, we add texture, we do whatever it is to do to create the finished product that is us. It is possible for people to get attached to their little forging mold marks and the little things that need to be broken off and say, oh no, I like myself in my raw natural state, so I don't want to polish or grind or engrave or do any of this. I'll just be fine. And you stay in the physical plane, you can stay doing your horizontal work your whole life. And that's fine. The higher work isn't for everybody. And if you claim that you want to do the higher work, that that's what you're called to do, then you have to go through this process of upgrading yourself. You have to take the raw forging and finish it. Break off the extra bits, polish everything, grind it, engrave it, shape it into something more versatile and useful than what came out of the mold. And so every spiritual system has every legitimate spiritual system. I'm not talking about the illegitimate systems. They have a name for that process. They have something that they call it. I'm calling it the quest for self. And when you saw the first notice I put out last week about the change in format for a while, that's what I called it, the quest of self.
I like the title.
Well, thank you. It's something I brought through. Did you remember the pictures I attached on the first announcements last week?
With the language, like it's etched in stone, and the blue flower of life.
So the flower of life with the Kabbalistic tree of life highlighted next to a stone with etching.
Right.
Okay. Do you know what that stone is?
Is that the Rosetta Stone?
That's the Rosetta Stone, which I referred to in the announcement. And that wasn't random.
What exactly is the Rosetta Stone?
I didn't even pay her to say it. Ding. You asked a good question. The Rosetta Stone is a tablet that was found in Egypt. And before I go into telling you why that tablet was so important, let me get some of this out of the way. Well, I'm going to refer to this, which is why I have all the show and tell stuff out for later. When we got past the Renaissance and people started waking up from the great sleep of the Dark Ages. And we started engaging with these ancient cultures, like Egypt. Egypt was the relatively easy one because it's mostly in a desert and you could mostly see most of the ruins. Now, granted, there's a lot that was under the sand that has been discovered since then. But you could see the pyramids, you could see the top of the Sphinx, you could see, the temples of Memphis, you could see all these things. And most of those are covered in writing. Most of the writing is hieroglyphics. And nobody could read them. Not even the modern Egyptians could read ancient hieroglyphics. That formula had been lost. And so here was this remnants of some ancient, vast, obviously advanced for its day civilization, with writings everywhere that no one could read. And scholars everywhere, archaeologists, historians, linguists, were all struggling to crack the code and be able to decipher all these thousands upon thousands of tablets covered with hieroglyphics. And then in 1799, a French soldier, I even looked up his name because I couldn't remember it, Pierre-Francois Bouchard was his name, discovered a huge stone tablet in Memphis, which is in Egypt, not the one in Tennessee, which hadn't been established yet in 1799. He discovered this, and what it was contained was a proclamation at the start of the reign of one of the Ptolemaic kings of Egypt, establishing his reign and proclaiming, here's the new king, blah, blah, blah. And it was written and carved in stone in 3 languages.
Impressive.
There was ancient Greek, which we knew. A lot of people knew how to read ancient Greek in 1799. It was a form of Egyptian language called Demotic, which is more modern than hieroglyphic, that they mostly knew how to read. They knew a lot of Demotic. And it was in hieroglyphics. And in each of the 3 sections of the Rosetta Stone said the same thing. It was the same proclamation written in 3 languages. And that was the stone that cracked the code. That's why the Rosetta Stone is so crucial in history, because all of a sudden, being a relatively loosely applied term, all of a sudden it wasn't an instant, it was within a couple of years, we knew how to read Egyptian hieroglyphics. Because we could compare the hieroglyphics to 2 other languages we knew how to read. And that opened up the whole world of Egypt and the whole world of 10,000 years of ancient history. And it's one of those moments, if anybody who listened to Coyote the Blind last week, he was talking about, with a great shift of consciousness. He compared it to the Japanese islands where one monkey learned something on one island, and then almost instantly the monkeys on the other island knew it through the consciousness.
Isn't that the 100th monkey?
Yeah, that's the monkey thing. And we're just slightly less advanced monkeys in these forms. So it's the same principle. So all of a sudden, the consciousness of humanity was such that Egyptian writing and Egyptian culture and Egyptian history was no longer off the edge of the map. it was no longer that region on the map that the map makers used to put at the edge where they didn't know what was there, so they would write, "Here be dragons." They could have just said unknown country, right? But no, they made up some, oh, here be dragons. Like, well, I didn't go there because there were dragons and they were bigger than me. So that's the only reason I didn't feel it. It's not like I've never been there. It's like they wouldn't admit they'd never been there. So they had to put that here be dragons. And the consciousness shift, it's very similar to anything that humans have a self-imposed limit on our abilities. The 4-minute mile is a big one from the 20th century. Is all these people running track and field for many, many years, trying how fast can we run a mile? And they were getting out 4:03, 4 minutes and 2 seconds, 4 minutes and 1 second and change, 4:01, 4:01. Nobody broke, and then it go up. Nobody was breaking 4-minute mile. Well, there was a young medical student, and I hate to say this, but I have to give credit where credit is due. He was English. His name was Roger Bannister. And with his knowledge of anatomy and physiology, and he measured how fast he could run this, that he did calculations. He said there's no reason a human being can't do that. It's just we just have to get a little stronger, a little faster, a little more endurance. So at some big championship meet, and he had been in that 4:02, 4:03, 4:02, 4:04 kind of range, along with several dozen other people. And at this meet, he ran a 3:59.6, 3 minutes 59.6 seconds. And of course, back then they didn't have the digital clocks up on the scoreboard. Nobody knew what the time was. They knew it was really fast for a mile. And so they get together, and it was like 3 people timed the first place guy, and 3 people timed the second place guy. That's what track and field was like when I was in college last century. It's like handheld timing and all that stuff. So they got together, they 3 watches, they average the time, it's 3:59.6, and the announcer starts to announce it. And all he got out was 3 minutes and 50, and the place erupted, and nobody heard, the change, right? They just knew he'd just broken the 4-minute mark. The impossible had been done. Within a month, 8 other people had broken the 4-minute mile and beaten his world record. Roger Bannister never ran faster than that again. Of course, he went on in medical school, became a doctor, and blah, blah, blah. Right? And he never held a world record again. But within a month, 8 other people had done it. Because a limitation had been removed from the collective consciousness. So when we're doing our spiritual work on self, we have to get rid of our own baggage that has put limits on us. But the huge thing we're also up against that isn't talked about much is the baggage and limits of society. It's that belief that all these idiotic conservative talk show hosts pull out whenever somebody tries to talk about their talking points a different way. Not even the left way, the right, just a different way. Oh, come on. Ah, come on. Ah, come on. You don't need that. Ah, come on. That's the sum total of their argument is ah, come on. In a condescending tone of voice. So that's out there in the collective consciousness, right? Is society doesn't believe there's higher planes. Society doesn't believe that we can astral travel. I remember in the 1970s, when Shirley MacLaine started writing her things. Out on a Limb was the title of her first book, because she put herself out on a limb. The modern world of the 1970s America wasn't ready to have a respected Academy Award winning actress suddenly appearing to go off the deep end by talking about astral travel and psychic phenomena, telepathy, as being real. Right? So she was out on a limb. That was probably one of the first books I read in this genre 40 years ago, 35 years, something like that.
I remember everyone talking about it.
Yeah, it was like, what? She said what? Oh my God, oh. You know, it was the same thing when the Beatles started growing their hair long. You probably remember that too. Oh, everybody loved the Beatles when they had their clean cut crew cuts, right? And then all of a sudden they just started letting it grow. And it got down over their hair was over their ears. Can you believe that? I just can't believe anybody would get on public, on television, even internet television, with hair over their ears. Can you believe it? And that's what we're up against, right? So it's not just your work on self and getting rid of your own baggage. It's the issue. It's all the collective conscious. It's hot today. I'm putting it back up. Of society, all those artificial beliefs, quote unquote, beliefs,
Of limitations.
that are limitations. So those of us who choose this path, we've got our own ghosts we're dealing with, and we've got the ghosts of everybody else.
And our ancestors.
Well, yeah, and the ancestors, just to make
What
things
your
exciting.
parents said, oh no, you don't see that. Yes, yeah, I did.
You know, by the time my dad passed, he was there. He was seeing stuff. 40 years ago, no. The last 15 years, he's been. And he's like, oh, man. My mom, she's good. She's good.
That's cool.
Yeah. Never too old to learn. So the Rosetta Stone is crucial. And I use that example deliberately for what we're talking about here. Lost my page.
Thanks for explaining the Rosetta Stone.
Yeah, it's an important piece of history. Anything that we want to learn, there's any shift in consciousness that we want to make, there's going to be a key. And it only takes one key to turn that lock and open that door. And the key to turn that lock and open the door is locked up inside the door. Just to make it nice and challenging. It's like safe. Here's the safe to open all the secrets of the universe. Inside the safe, and the combination is locked up inside the safe also. So you have to find another way of getting the key, getting the combination. So what you have to realize is just like in the movie The Matrix, where there is no spoon, there is no safe. There is no door with a lock. All those are manifestations of the hologram, of the matrix. And so what we're talking about here is there's a core structure to the universe. And when you find the key for every individual problem you go on, that's when we have those aha moments. Ah, I get it. I learned how to ride a bicycle. That's what they were all trying to tell me. Right? Yeah, I'm pedaling and I'm leaning and I'm steering and I'm coordinating all that, but until you actually do it, it's all theory. It's part of that spiritual theory, exercise theory. You've got to turn it into real practice. And then once you get it, you've got that little aha moment and your whole being shifts. And now you know how to ride a bicycle. Every one of us in this room, probably every one of you watching, knows how to ride a bicycle. Because you went through that little aha moment. So to get that key to the safe, you have to learn to read the structure of the universe. If you're in Star Trek world, and you're on the holodeck and somebody's created this holographic projection, you have to learn how to see past the holographic projection and see the structure of the holodeck. If you're in the movie The Matrix, you have to learn to do what Neo did, which was see the code behind and know what's really going on. To realize that the world we think we're in is really just a mathematical creation of frequencies. And like a lot of things on the spiritual path, including all the legitimate isms, there's a whole lot of things that people tell us we need to do, and very few instructions. Oh, you have to learn to open your heart, John. Just go do that. Well, how the heck do I do that? Just go do it. Thanks. Right? So that's what we learn to do. Right? Is you got to figure it out. It's like the Siemens license. Somehow you've got to get experience to go get a license, but you can't get a license if you don't have experience. So you just got to figure that out. You got to fake it till you make it. Wouldn't it be nice if somebody kind of just wrote an instruction manual for all of this? It would be really nice if somebody from the other side of the veil sent a message where they came down here and wrote a manual and said, here, do this. And then they went away and we go, oh, okay. Well, I can do it. That would have been really nice.
Probably would have been burnt by the church.
Probably. Probably would have. Well, it turns out it's been done. It's been done more than once. There are wise women and wise men throughout history who have written these things down and given to us, and we laugh and we burn the book and we burn them at the stake. And they go, oh, okay, gotta go down and let me try this another way. Let me try it with a different group of people, and let me try it yet another way with that same group of people. And that knowledge starts to accumulate. If you know how to read between the lines, or for those with eyes to see and ears to hear, that's what the information's there. And it's been collected under a lot of names. Some of these instructions have been given to us in artwork. Sometimes it's in all the stories that culture has that now our modern academicians call mythology. That in the olden days was just called the history of the world. It's been collected in the sacred writings in many different ways. It's been given to us pictorially in the Tarot. In more modern times, the work of Joseph Campbell has revealed the hero's journey. He was a student of Carl Jung, and Jungian psychology is based on what he called the archetypes. And after time, we realize that when we look at these mythologies, a lot of these ancient cultures called this background structure of the universe, this framework for the holodeck, if you want to think of it that way, by the same exact name in cultures that apparently never had any physical contact. So either they were communicating through the collective consciousness of humanity, or they were all receiving information from divine beings from the same source. And the name that we give this background structure of the universe is the tree of life. It's in the Bible. The Hebrews have it. The Norse have it. The Celtic peoples have it. In a model specifically called the tree of life. The Australian Aboriginals have it. And many other cultures, if you learn how to read the mythology, it's there. It's just not drawn in nice, neat pictures. And so here in modern times in Western cultures, in the US, Canada, Europe, is we mostly use the Hebrew version. It comes from the Kabbalah. Now, the Kabbalah is a set of Hebrew writings that constituted their esoteric work. It wasn't shared with the masses. We have the Torah and what became the Old Testament. That was given to everybody, but the Kabbalah was reserved for the priesthood caste for many thousands of years. And in roughly medieval times, it started making its way into the academic parts of European culture. And hence we know about it. We have books about it. I've got a stack of books over here about the Kabbalah, and I'm going to show you some later. But that's not where I'm going first. I want to impress upon you that this work we're doing about the quest for self isn't a Hebrew, it isn't a Judeo-Christian process. We're talking about the core fabric of the universe that everyone, every race, every tribe is part of. Those of us in Western culture which is mostly steeped in the Judeo-Christian religions, we tend to use that for two reasons. Number one, that's the religious background we have. And number two, for whatever fortuitous reason, the information about the Kabbalah and the Kabbalic tree of life survived the Roman Catholic book burnings. Probably because by the time that started in medieval times, the Jewish peoples already had 1,000 years experience of hiding in plain sight, making themselves relatively unseen, and keeping things secret that weren't meant to be shared yet. And for that reason, we still have the Kabbalah. And I'm going to show this picture real quickly now. We'll come back to it later. This is the Kabbalistic tree of life. Make sure this is shown good. And it's the 10 spheres with a mythical 11th interconnected by 22 paths. And this is very graphic. And there's reasons why that resonates a lot with us, which I'll go into later. My printer isn't doing reds well right now. I need a new cartridge. Reds and yellows. It does the greens and blues fairly well. But, in the Nordic cultures, they also have the tree of life. And you won't be able to read the detail on here. But there's an upper world, a middle world, and a lower world. And each is subdivided into little worlds and interconnected particular ways with the rainbow bridge. You come down here to the Hebrew version. These three paths leaving the lower world up to the middle worlds. These three paths combine to form something called by the Hebrews the rainbow bridge. So you can see we're tapping into the same information. This is one of the common representations of the Celtic tree of life. It shows the upper worlds and the main trunk of the middle world and the lower world all intertwined, all interconnected. That's what Celtic knotwork shows.
That's pretty.
Yeah, you pass that over. This version of the Celtic tree of life is a bit more detailed. It shows the upper world, the middle world, the lower world, how the roots come up around. It's got a lot of similarity to the Nordic tree of life. And there's stories about the gods and the beings that live in each of these worlds, and that there's different places in each of the worlds. And obviously, all these different cultures are tapping into the same thing.
Can you pass the Norse one around?
Oh, sure, sorry. Here's these other two. So, when you start to compare the mythologies of every culture, what you find is there are stories about each one of these spheres and each one of these paths on the Hebrew tree of life. Okay, here's the fool all the way through, right? Oh, and all the way through. So, when you compare those stories to all the other mythologies, they start to sound remarkably similar because they're tapping into that same higher structure. Here's a book that I really like. This is one of our Norse mythology books. This is by Kevin Crossley-Holland. And this is very well written. It's got all the myths, and it talks about all the worlds and the gods and the quarrels among the gods. It sounds a lot like the Greek myths with the quarrels among the gods and whatnot. It would sound a lot like the Egyptian myths with the quarrels among the gods and killings and eatings and resurrections and all kinds of things like that. So this other book I have here, and I've got 8 or 10 more that I'm not going to show you. This is called Celtic Myths and Legends by T.W. Rolliston, and it's got some lovely artwork on it in the cover, and it's got more inside, some of these great old lithographs, like so. It's a wonderful book.
Cool artwork.
Yeah, it's just great artwork here. I'll pass these over to you.
Thank you.
You can look at those. Any one of these systems is a perfectly legitimate system to help you on your quest for self. Some of you who follow E.J. Gold, and he's got his new orbs that he runs, which is a computer program. It's like a video game, and you go through a series of chambers and worlds. He's got a video game method of tapping into these chambers of the macro dimensions, which is in keeping with the tree of life. That's why they work. That's why these programs work. They're tapping into a higher truth, which is the background structure of the universe. So, if you want to go back and relearn the Greek myths and use that, and only use the Tree of Life map as a guide, you can do that. If you say, wow, those Norse myths sound cool, I'm going to do those. Or the Celtic, or the Egyptian, or the Aboriginal, or any of them. It's all fair game. The target is for you to get into your insides. The key is you have to go inside. And that's where all the knowledge is inside you. If you're looking outside for the latest thing, the latest answers, the latest hot new technique of spirituality, the latest cool new energy medicine, and you're looking for everything outside, you're looking in the wrong place. You're like the guy at nighttime at the supermarket parking lot, and people come out of the store and they see him looking around the grounds. Well, what are you looking for? Oh, I lost my keys. And so they all start helping them look. And sometimes I said, wow, I've not seen them, but it's a good thing you lost them here under the street light. Oh no, I lost them over there. My car's over there in the dark. Well, what are you looking here for? Because there's light here. There's dark over there. He's looking in the wrong place. It might be easier to look here, but he's not going to find his key, which is over there. You want to find your key, you've got to look in the hardest place of all to look, which is inside you. Before we go any further, now that people have had a chance to log in, who's online?
We have got Patricia.
Tracy.
Hi, Patricia.
We got Muad'Dib.
What do
Dee.
We got Bonnie.
Mine.
Gloria.
We have Dennis.
Dennis.
And Maria.
Maria. Anybody else?
No, that's it.
Okay.
No Will.
No Will. None of our invisibles like Liv. So this, or the Celtic one I just showed you, or the Nordic one I just showed you, you can think of this as a map. It's a map to the universe. At the macrocosmic level, the really big, and it's a map to the microcosm, the really small. So you are an example of a microcosm. This is a map of you. It's a map of your inner consciousness and your mental circuitry, your emotional circuitry. It's a map to how to move your consciousness around the higher planes of existence. And as a map, it's very useful. It's important for you to learn the map. It is also important for you to realize and fully understand in your core that the map is not the territory.
Inside.
The map is not the territory. You pick up a road map because you want to drive to Denver.
Right.
They're separated by this far on the map, right? Here's Mount Shasta, here's Denver. You walk across the map, you're not in Portland, or you're not in Denver, right? The map is not the territory. You can use the map to guide you, but now you have to go out into the territory if you want to go to Denver or Portland or wherever is on your schedule. So this map, to your microcosm, this is not the territory. This just tells you, oh, I have different aspects of myself that are functionally interconnected in this way. Now I have to go find them and work with them. And if I have a block on one of these pathways, I need to fix that. If one of these destination points is out of balance and isn't functioning right, I need to work on that. But that's inside. The map is not the territory. You use the map to go explore the territory, to master the territory, to learn it, understand it. So the maps are very useful. What did I say in my notes that I wanted to share with you? So some of you may be learning some of this information for the first time. It's important though to realize this isn't new. This has been around a long time. It's very ancient. At one time, every spiritual system, every religion had this knowledge. This was what was taught in the ancient mystery schools. Part of it. The techniques of how to access these higher planes of consciousness that in modern times of 40, 50 years ago, when Shirley MacLaine was first making this popularized, that everybody thought was so outlandish. At one time was a common truth. But over time, this knowledge was largely lost. It was lost due to wars and the people who knew it being killed. The buildings that had it carved into the walls, some of them may have been destroyed, burned, crushed, ground to dust, whatever. Other spiritual systems came along and were combined with political systems for purposes of physical world power. And so they worked hard to suppress this knowledge. I'm sure if you think a little bit, you might think of one of those kinds of churches that would do that. If not, come talk to me later and I'll give you a clue. Romans. But despite those best efforts, anything that is a divine truth has this funny way of coming back. It's like down at the arcade, the whack-a-mole game, right? Mole pops over here, you hit him, and then it pops up over there, you hit. No matter how many times they whack the mole trying to suppress this knowledge, it just keeps coming back. Almost like God wants this available. And you try to work against God, A, you're swimming uphill, and B, you're going to lose eventually. God is not someone to be trifled with. So, because of those kinds of situations, though, the wise men, the wise women from all the different cultures, they learned to keep this knowledge hidden, more or less. That's why it's often disguised as children's tales, mythology, poetic songs and dance. You didn't walk into libraries and find secrets of the universe that are used to make governments obsolete. They didn't have that section in the library. At least not identified by that name. It's over here. Well, mythology. 99% of the people don't go look. And I don't think that percentage has changed much over the years. Would you do me a favor and give me some more water, please?
Sure.
Nice and cold.
Mm-hmm.
So, with every major religion, every major society, every major spiritual system, there's always been those select groups of people who kind of kept themselves aside. They didn't run with the crowd. In the Hebrew days, where this was, we had a group called the Essenes. Christ was a member of the Essenes. This is some of the knowledge they had. In other cultures, they call them the Magi, or they call them the Toltecs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's those kinds of groups that have held this knowledge and kept it as safe as possible so that going forward into the future, we had access to it. This is a map of the mind. This is a map of your mind. And it's a map of how you come to know yourself. The Lord's Prayer was one of the secrets that was revealed by Christ. And it's very Kabbalistic. Okay? We'll get into the spheres in the future. We're not really starting our complete discussion of this. But the sphere at the bottom is called the kingdom. This is Malkuth. It represents the physical world that we live in. This is Hod. It's called splendor, and it's sometimes called the power. This is Nitzak, also known as victory, also known as glory. So the Lord's Prayer is talking about the kingdom, the power, and the glory. There's one example of a triad on the tree of life, and that's a formula to make the first major step up the tree of life, taking your consciousness from here up to this triad.
So he's smuggled.
Exactly. Everything in the Bible, both Old Testament and New Testament, is smuggling. It's a parable. There's a higher level meaning for it. So this is Christ's Lord's Prayer. This is the key to Christ consciousness. Now, everybody out there, everybody and their mother, every airy-fairy, New Age, fluffy, feel-good, New Age religion or philosophy talks about Christ consciousness, but they go to great lengths to avoid talking about Christ. Well, good luck with that, first of all. It ain't going to work. And the key to Christ consciousness is getting your consciousness from here up to the center sphere called Tiferet. We'll go in, don't worry about that. I'm just giving you an example of how this information has been used and transmitted, hidden in plain sight. So this is a long-term exploration we're doing. I expect this to go a minimum of 2 months, probably 3 in this series, to really get you to the point where you first have to learn the map, you have to learn the language, then you have to read it. Because there's maps and there's maps and there's maps. You want to pick up a road map down at AAA or the gas station and drive from here to Portland, you've got a few options. And you learn how to read that. And then there's road signs out there in the territory that tell you, oh, turn here, take this exit. And along the way, you'll see occasionally roads that says, yes, you're on I-5. No, you're on 97. But wait, it says I-5, but it says south. I'm supposed to be going north to Portland. How did you got on the wrong exit. You're coming back the wrong way. So you got to get off at the next exit, turn around and go back. But if you don't pay attention, the next thing you know, you're in Los Angeles going, where the heck's Portland? That's what I mean by the map is not the territory. You have to learn to read the map, and you have to learn to read the territory.
Can you explain why Kabbalah is spelled with a K and Q and what's the difference?
Yeah, in just a minute.
Okay.
So, so the map is not the territory, but then there's maps and maps and maps is where it's going. So if you want to take a topographic map and go cross country, you know, you're looking at the map, well, the old gold mine's supposed to be, 100 yards from this lake up here, and there's no roads, there's no trails, all the landmarks are different, but you've got a topographic map, right? Using a map and compass to do what's called orienteering, you have to orient yourself and go off through the wilderness. That's a very different process than reading a map to drive from the airport. So you have to learn to read this map, or the Norse map, or the Celtic map, or the Greek mythology map, or the Egyptian pantheon map, and it's all describing the same territory. That's key. And it's all the territory that is the structure behind this holodeck. So that's what we have to learn. So, Little Eagle over here asked a question. When you start getting to literature of the Kabbalah, you'll notice that there's 3 spellings.
Oh, 3.
There's Kabbalah with a K, there's Kabbalah with a Q, and there's Kabbalah with a C. And so, a very logical question is, what's the difference? And my answer to that is, well, not much really. But why take something, a subject which is talking about the same information from 3 slightly different viewpoints, and make it easy by spelling it the same way, when it's so much easier to confuse beginners by spelling them all differently? So the 3 spellings are done very deliberately to confuse beginners. That's really the bottom line. So you might read somewhere that Kabbalah with a K is a spelling for the traditional Hebrew method of Kabbalah study, which is very mystical as taught by Hebrew rabbis. You might read that Kabbalah with a Q, Q-Bala we sometimes call it, is the way the spelling is used for the Western esoteric mystery tradition folks, the Western magicians, for the way they use it, which is much more practical and much less mystical than the way the ancient rabbis used it. And you might read that Kabbalah with a C is the way all that Q-Bala stuff got repackaged to make it compatible with modern Christianity in an attempt to not get burned at the stake, which means they watered the heck out of it. It's watered down, and it doesn't carry as much juice. That is the sad truth. But those are things you might read. Those are just theories. The truth is, the 3 methods of spelling are just done to confuse beginners. That's really the only reason. Because they're really all talking about the same stuff, so why do you need 3 spellings? Oh, it's just to confuse them. Is he serious? Or is it a joke?
No, you're serious.
Joke. Or both.
No, you're serious.
Anyway, we have more easily usable information about the Hebrew method, the Hebrew tree of life, than the Norse, which is probably in 2nd place, than the Celtic, which is in 3rd place, than any of the mythology approaches, which don't have a nice graphic linear picture. Our Western minds like linear. So this is as linear, with all these interconnecting pathways, as we can make this information. As confusing as this looks at first approach, and it is, this is the simplified version. So, you will get to know this, because I have a secret formula for making that easily understood. And as we progress, that's where we're going to go. There's a few basic principles. These are probably not the only ones, but these are the ones that came to me as I was preparing for this class, that I want you to understand, or at least be aware of as we proceed. This is like the core laws of physics which underlie all of the world and all of science. So if you want to study biology, at some point you need to know something about physics. If you want to understand chemistry, you need physics. Geology, physics. Astronomy, physics. If you want to know a little bit about physics, then you need math, and in math you need, there's higher math, but then it all comes down to two things, geometry and arithmetic. If you want to do anything in the universe, you need geometry, you need arithmetic, and then you need some core laws of physics, right? So, as we're going into this spiritual investigation on your quest for self, there's a few things you need to know. These are core axioms. Everybody knows what an axiom is, right? Okay, this is a mathematical term. An axiom is something that is an initial assumption that you must have in order to proceed.
Theory?
No. It's before a theory. An axiom, if you don't have the axiom, you can't do anything, right? So an axiom is the core beginnings. So the concept of numbers is an axiom. Counting is an axiom. It can't be proven. Axioms cannot be proven, they must simply be accepted. Any system of science or math or philosophy, spirituality, religion, needs to have the fewest number of axioms possible. So when I teach physics, for example, after having done this for a long time now, I don't teach physics the way the textbooks teach physics. In the world of physics, you go to college, first year physics, you learn what's called Newtonian physics, which is, forces and vectors and angles and sound and light, and if here's the trajectory. If you throw the dwarf at a trajectory of 40-degree angles, how far down the football field does the pumpkin squash? I mean the dwarf squash. Right? That's Newtonian physics. Then you get into the second year where you're learning modern physics, which is quantum mechanics and relativity and all these other things, and you get told, okay, half of what you learned last year is wrong, now you're going to learn this. Then you get into your third year, well, half of what you learned last year is wrong, now you're going to learn this. And so by the time you finish your 4-year undergraduate degree in physics, at least half of that 4 years, what you find out at the end of the road was a complete waste of time, because it's all stuff that's been disproven. So this is one of my complaints about physics education. No other field of science does that. Physics is taught chronologically. Newton was godlike, so you start with Newton and go on from there. And so they teach physics the order things were discovered over a 300 or 400 year period, going back to the time of Galileo and through Newton and on through the, and it's just a chronological history of who discovered what in what order.
Well, you could take that in history class.
Well, and then there are history of science classes.
Yeah.
In biology, they don't bother with that. They don't bother that somebody did this and then this and then this. They go, here's what we know now. And so my version of teaching physics is, here's what we know now. And to teach everything of here's what we know now requires one and only one axiom. And that axiom is energy. There's a concept of energy. If we accept that there is energy in the universe, everything else will follow logically. You teach all the material that we know in physics in a progression, in a flow, where you don't have to unlearn anything. Oh yeah, all those equations last year that you struggled to memorize, forget about it. Here's all you need to know. So what do we really know? It's one of the ideas that, if some of you follow my Facebook group, What We Know, it's all about what do we really know that they aren't telling us about every field of human intelligence, including physics, engineering, medicine, science, history, whatever. So we need these core axioms. So that's kind of what these are kind of cautionary warnings as you proceed with this quest to know yourself, in quest of self. So axiom number one, if you want to think of it that way, is as soon as you commit and dedicate yourself to this higher work to know thyself and master the control of yourself, to place control of yourself under the command of your higher self, your essence, you will be tested. You will be tempted by all the wants and desires of the flesh that are intended to pull you off track. Oh, you want to do this higher work. Oh, look, shiny. Nice job over here. You know, we committed to move to the mountains because getting out of LA and into a remote area that has certain physical properties, certain energetic properties. The apartment up front with the gorgeous view opened up, and it was only $200 a month more than we were paying already. And it was just wonderful. And we were like ready to jump on it, but we were like 6 months away from wanting to move. And we're like, no, this is a test. So we said no. We turned it down. Some weird idiot moved in, and a few months later we moved out. We came here. So you will be tested. You'll be tempted to pull you off track. You will be tested. And not just once. You will be tested repeatedly. Every little quantum step up, you're going to be tested. For a couple of reasons. One, to make sure you're committed. Number two, to make sure you're worthy. That you've really passed the test you need in order to function at that next step up. Like in martial arts. You go from your white belt to your yellow belt, we expect you to know certain things, be able to do certain techniques without falling down and smacking your head on the pavement. We expect you to, if somebody punches at your head, to be able to deal with that threat, right? Simple stepping punch at your head is one of the tests to go from white belt to yellow belt, let's say. And if you just stand there and get punched in the face, well, guess what? You just flunked your test for yellow belt. So you will be tested every step of the way to ensure you're competent and ensure you're committed to this growth of self. It's a process, not an event. Axiom number two is that this work is going to require you to develop a basic understanding and a basic knowledge of the flow of energy. Not just within you, but within the whole universe and how you interact with the universe, how the energy flows on this map, because this is both in you and the universe. You need to start thinking in terms of energies and frequencies and vibrations, and a lot less from the standpoint of physical objects. Kind of related to, you can almost think of it really as a subset of the first axiom, that you will be tested and you will be tempted to be pulled off track. But it's important enough I've given it its own axiom number. Its number 3 is you will be tested by a kundry.
Oh, what?
A kundry.
Oh, okay.
Kundry. That's a mythological character. It's usually portrayed as a female trying to entice a male with sex.
Oh, like what happened to Buddha, right?
I don't remember the Buddhist story because I'm not a Buddhist, but probably.
He was tempted.
Right.
Yeah.
So in the movie, and it's a very good documentary of this process called Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Sir Galahad finds the Grail castle, he thinks, because there's a glowing grail hanging above the castle. So he goes in, and it's not the Grail Castle, it's Castle Anthrax. And it's full of these luscious little babes. And they want to undress him and bathe him, and they want him to spank them, and then comes the sex. They were Kundries pulling him off his quest. That happens a lot more than you realize in life. You meet someone, and right after you commit to doing something, you'll meet someone to pull you off in a different direction. And it could be not necessarily they're the evil temptress, because it goes both ways. Women get pulled off track by men, men can get pulled off track by women. Or whatever the object of your sexual desire is. If you're a lesbian, you'll be probably pulled off by a woman. If you're a gay man, you'll be tempted by another man. And that happens. And right after Bonnie and I got engaged, I had women coming out of every crack in the woodwork, every crack in the sidewalk, wanting to tempt me. I literally one day had 2 or 3 women chasing me and following down the aisles at a Trader Joe's supermarket.
Which one?
It was the one in Redondo Beach.
Oh.
Only 640 miles away.
Okay.
And it's like I have my list, because we're really good at lists, and so I go down, oh, I need one of those, I check it off. I go down, I need one of those, I check it off. And all of a sudden these women are like, oh, you buy that? So do I. And they follow me to the next thing I got. And the next thing I got 3 women chasing. So I'm like, okay, I'm out of here. So I go to the other side of the store. They follow me there. So then I get one thing there, I go all the way. I got out of there as fast as I could. I'd be out walking our dog Shiloh. And women coming up to me, what a lovely dog you have. And it's, oh yeah, he's my fiance's dog. What? Boom, they turn around and run, right? But if I didn't, I knew what was going on. Bonnie would get home that night and we'd joke about it. And it's like, how many women chased you today? Right? Only 4. Oh, slow day. See, she had an engagement ring, right? You know, men before we got nothing, right? The tradition doesn't say women got to give men an engagement ring. But she had this lovely ring that you've probably seen. And I had nothing, so they were all, no ring, and he's got a dog. Apparently that's all it needs. He shops at Trader Joe's and he doesn't have a ring. Oh, that must be it. He's my guy. That's all their criteria was. But no, they were kundras. They were sent by the universe to tempt me. Oh, you think you want life with your spiritual partner, and you don't want to just have a steady string of floozies. Well, throw a steady string of floozies at you to see.
The floozies, I haven't heard that term in a long time.
They were actually probably all very nice women. But at the moment, they were fulfilling the role of a kundra. They were trying to pull me off track. Didn't work. Because I'm Scottish. And I'm a stubbornness of me. But that's the kind of thing that can happen. So the kundri is a way of getting you to short your energy out. You've started trying to move your energy. I just talked about energy. We're moving energy in a way that's raising your energy, raising your frequency, building energy, building your personal power. And all a kundri will do is sexually entice you to ground that energy out.
Who sends them?
Say again?
Who sends them? Is
The
it
universe.
The universe?
Yeah, your higher self, your essence is, it's a test. You will be tested every step. And at some point, a lot of people fail. And even when you get to the level where I'm at, or the level Coyote's at, we continually are tested. We have to recommit and rededicate every single day. The dark side would love to pull Coyote off track, or EJ off track, or me off track. Not that I'm quite at their level yet. But they would love to, the dark side would. So, every day, I go to the dark side. And you ain't getting me, right? Every day. Every day, I pick up my sword and say, "Up yours very much." Every
That's a good practice.
day, right? You want it? Come and get it. So it could be just the new job. It could be the shiny new car. It could be the new girlfriend or boyfriend.
Or money.
It could be money. Well, I'll give you a whole bunch of money, and Bonnie has stories of that. And she was on her path to go do something. Oh, but we'll give you a house. We'll just give you a house. But it wasn't her path. Right? Axiom number 4. This one is really important to know. The axiom number 4 is basically the reality that at some level, you already know all of this material. Everything I'm telling you is going to resonate as a truth because it's resonating in harmony with this. Or this, the Nordic version. Or this, the Celtic version. These are all true. They're all telling us the same story with different color icing on the cake. You already know it. And so this process is not a process of learning. What is it?
It's a self-exploration inside.
No. What do you say it is? It's not learning, and you already know it.
Oh, knowing the territory.
It's remembering.
Oh, remember.
You're remembering this. You're going to go, ah, that's why it's so. You're going to remember. So anytime that you start to have a hard time figuring it out, or it's not, just remember it. Choose to make it easy. It's like when you go onto an examination in school, you've studied the material, you've known it, you've practiced it, you've done the homework. You get in the test, you're like, now just, you know it. So just choose to make it easy, choose to remember. So axiom number 5, and this is as far as I went, I'll probably come up with others as we go, is there's a model of your consciousness that in part is explained by this, and in part is explained through the language of modern psychology. And there's nothing modern in it, it's really ancient psychology. Is you have your conscious mind, but there's a part of your conscience that's sometimes referred to as the subconscious. And they have this model of the iceberg where only 15% of the iceberg is above the water, the rest is below the water. So above the water is what we're consciously aware of, and you've got the subconscious mind down. I don't like the term subconscious. I tend to use the term non-conscious. Subconscious implies that it's lower in some way. And it's not necessarily lower. In some cases, it's higher powered capabilities of our mind.
Are you talking about what non-conscious as we're sleeping? That's
No.
what EJ's.
No. I'm not sure I agree with the language of anybody that I've read or heard speak. I don't necessarily agree with Coyote's use of the language, which is consistent with modern psychology. I don't necessarily agree with EJ, and I certainly don't agree with most of the psychology books I've read. There's something that all of that languaging is missing. And by non-conscious, it's, I like some of the computer model analogies. The conscious mind is what's loaded into RAM, and it's in the buffers you have access to right now. Below that, or outside with what's visible on the screen, you have memory, and you have different types of memory in different places. You have memory in what's called the read-only memory. That's what happens when you boot up. You have RAM memory, you have hard drive memory, and then you can connect to other outside memory. You can connect to memory on the cloud. That's what I would call the human collective consciousness. So you've got your non-conscious, you have your conscious, you have super consciousness, which is your part of your essential self and higher self that's working on higher level matters of the essence, whereas the non-conscious memory is often can be thought of as the conscious mind of the machine. And then outside all of that is the collective consciousness of humanity. I don't like the word subconscious because of the way psychologists have used it and described it, and it's a very limiting model. And so and a lot of times you will see and I did this when I researched the book, Feel You by Feel the World, and I specifically avoided this one aspect of languages. Most of the writings out there, when they're referring to the collective consciousness of humanity, even when they draw the diagram correctly, they refer to it as the collective unconscious. So I don't like the term subconscious, I don't like the term unconscious. It implies a limitation on capability that is artificial. As far as I'm aware, this is original with me, but I'm probably getting it from the real collective consciousness. This is something that has come to me to bring forward, that needs to be brought forward, and I give full credit to whoever out there in the ethers sent me that message. I'm just delivering the message. And I would put a footnote and a citation after it if I knew who sent it. But in a certain sense, I know who sent it. Thank you, God. So I use the term non-conscious, conscious, superconscious, and collective conscious, not collective unconscious. And there are very specific reasons for that. That is the model of our mind. It is important to keep in the background as we go, because this is the functional diagram of everything I just said. We'll get to the definitions later. I don't know how much we'll get to tonight. Tonight is setting the stage. Okay. One more little thing to cover, and then I'm going to open it up for a lot of questions. Is just like in any high school or college or university coursework, even you go to your local adult school, there's going to be possibility of having a required textbook or 10. So I'm going to tell you right now what you really need for this class. What you really need for your class, for this class, is this. You need a model of the tree of life, the Kabbalic tree of life, because that is the model I will be using the most. You can print out an 8.5 by 11 one on a sheet of paper from your printer. There's a gazillion on the internet. If you do an image search on Kabbalah Tree of Life, you're going to be inundated with so many different variations, many of them wrong through ignorance, and some of them wrong deliberately to mislead the uninitiated. And so you have to look at a lot of different sources and figure out which ones are right and which ones have the information on you want. What I recommend you start with is you make one. So what we did is we got a glass and we drew some circles, and then we went over it with Sharpies, and we took a ruler and we drew lines, and then somebody other than me colored them in. And the colors mean something to us. So that's what we did here. Now I have a smaller version of this with more notes on each path and each sphere that I will explain to you as we progress. So this, some version of a drawing of the Kabbalistic Tree of Life that as I'm talking, as you're reading any of the other optional material you decide to read, that you can look at and you can meditate in front of this, because that's one of the ways we're going to be working with this. That's the only thing I consider mandatory and a requirement, is you have to obtain or make something, and the bigger the better.
I'll come over here with a board and
Sure.
felt pens and
Yeah,
a
you're
ruler.
welcome to do that.
and get
Okay. There are more books on the Kabbalistic Tree of Life than there are fleas on a camel. Literally, probably. And some of them, well, let's see, you can divide them into 4 categories. Easy to understand and hard to understand. And well written and poorly written. And so that's a 2x2 matrix. So what you're going for are easy to understand and well written.
Mhm.
The next one you want to get are the ones that are easy to understand, hard to understand and well written. The poorly written, avoid all those, whether they're easy to understand or not. They're easy to understand, but they're poorly written and they're teaching garbage, well, just, you don't want those. So with that little 2x2 matrix in mind, easy to understand and well written, this is the book I recommend as a starting point. It's called The Practical Kabbalah Guidebook, and the author's name is C.J.M. Hopkins. And I'm going to hold this up to the camera so people can see it. That's what it looks like. You can probably find it on the used book market under $10. I don't know how much ours was, but we got it on a used book market somewhere. A friend of ours who has since passed beyond the veil used to have this in their guest cottage, and we'd stay with them and we'd read it, and we'd say, we just need to get one of these. So we got one, and here it is. And this is pictorial, and the artwork is good. The descriptions are on point and short and easy to understand, and it's complete. It's if I was limited to one textbook for this material, this would be it for a beginning class, not a textbook for an advanced class. So for those of you just starting out, this is a highly recommended book, but none of it's required for the work we're doing. It's just recommended. A more advanced book, which I recommend for this material for 2 reasons, is this one. It's called The Kabbalistic Tarot, a textbook of mystical philosophy by Robert Wang. And this version of it looks like this. And I like this book because it starts to combine information from the point of view of the Kabbalistic Tree of Life as well as the Tarot. The Tarot is another way of describing the same structure. Now, the traditional Kabbalists get very angry and in great denial when they claim that the Tarot has nothing to do with the Kabbalah. And everybody else looks at it and goes, oh yeah? Right, sure, whatever you say, whatever gets you through the night. And it may be that the Tarot did not derive from the Hebrew rabbis, but it sure as heck derived from the same place the Hebrew rabbis got their information. because there's too, we'll get into it probably next week, there's too many parallels between Tarot and the tree of life. And by parallels, I mean a 100% correlation between the two systems. So this book has lengthy descriptions of each path and each tarot card, each Sephira, each of the worlds. We might get to the worlds tonight, although I doubt it. The next book that I recommend is called The Mystical Kabbalah by Dion Fortune, the same Dion Fortune who wrote a couple of the books we talked about a month ago or so that are recommended and or required reading. Now, the earliest edition of this book, you heard me lament that, just in passing, because we weren't onto this subject yet, that she wrote it and it talks all about the worlds and the columns and the spheres, but she didn't write about the 22 pathways, or the so-called major arcana of the Tarot. She was going to write a book about them, and then she died. And so I was lamenting that I had the nerve of her to die. Well, it turns out that in the fullness of times, I recommended this book to my dad, and my dad acquired one. And the edition he required says, new edition, features additional text by Dion Fortune. Turns out, she had written a journal article once about the 22 paths, the 22 major arcana, that was going to be the outline for her full book. So we never got the full book, but this edition has that in it. It has the article she wrote for one of the journals.
Leave it to your dad to get that one.
Yeah, good job, Dad. Thank you. So anyway, I haven't even had a chance to read it, because until this last week, I didn't realize it was there. It's like I box of books from my dad, and it's on the shelf, and I start looking, I go, new edition gold text by Dion Fortune. I thought she died, and so I read the description of what it was, and I went, oh, very clever.
Gift from beyond.
Yep, exactly. So this is probably third place for the books I recommend for learning about the Kabbalah tree of life. The next two books I have to talk about are completely optional. Some of you may have heard me talk about this one before. It's by Edwin Steinbrecher, called The Inner Guide Meditation. It's one of the systems of meditating with this and the archetypes as represented in the Tarot that are associated with each sphere and each world and each of the paths. And I worked through a lot of this back in the day, and it's very powerful and it's very effective. And last but not least, in a category of very well written, very accurate, and extremely hard to understand, is a book called 777 and Other Kabbalistic Writings of Aleister Crowley. The book cover will look something like this. This is our paperback version. We also have a hardback with the paper thing over the hardback, and it's all in color instead of just black and white. And this is actually the first book on Kabbalah I found. First book on Tree of Life. And I used got it at a used bookstore. I had no idea why, and I would try to read it, and I couldn't make heads or tails of it, and I'd throw it aside. And a year would go by, and I'd pick it up, and I would start to read, and I'd go, there's something here, but I don't know what it is. This book presupposes that you already know at least all of this, if not also all of what's in the Fortune book. So when I found these and read those, and I come back to this and I go, oh, now I get it. Right? This is just too advanced. But there's one thing in here, now that I've learned my way around this book, that in my opinion, opinion of both Oria and I, is absolutely one of the greatest gifts to humanity, is the work Aleister Crowley did on the tables of correspondences between every system he knew or found of mythology or magic or spiritual systems to row, whatever, between every path and every sphere on here, comparing it to every other system out there. So each of the mythological pantheons are already laid out here. Everything you might even think of remotely is on here in these tables. This is a gem. When you find a good deal on one, pick it up, because at some point in your studies, you will use it. And so there's a lot of other things out there. Don't feel compelled to go buy any of these that I've shown you. If you have books on the Kabbalah already, or the Tree of Life, and you want to know how to use them with this material, contact me. I answer emails if I don't miss them. So if I go more than 48 hours and haven't answered an email, I've missed it. Send it again, ping me, text me, whatever. Throw rocks over the fence. Don't break my windows, though.
And don't put a drone over his house.
Drones over my house that are low enough to be shot down by a shotgun will be. Haven't had to actually do it yet, but I came about this close to having to pull the trigger once. When a drone was illegally flying about 10 feet above our house. Yeah. So I grabbed my shotgun and went out, and it had gone. But I got a message to the people doing it that if it ever happened again, they could expect their drone to come down to the earth in pieces. And we haven't had it back. That was years ago. So at this point, I want to open it up for any questions. I've tried to present why this is important, why the quest for self is important. Because you've got to get rid of the baggage. You have to build the strength in the areas where you're weak. You have to achieve balance in all areas in order to work your consciousness up the higher planes. And this isn't easy work. And how hard it is depends on how willing you are to look at in the mirror and realize any unbalanced energy coming back is all about you. It's not about your teacher being mean to you. It's not about your friends being mean or anybody else being mean. It's about you. And if you can accept that reality and just work on self, then you're on the right path. So to do that path, there's a structure in the universe that is the roadmap to all this work. And we call that structure the Tree of Life. And it's tied in with a lot of other systems, so that's where we're going. Next week, we're going to get talking about this and a description of where this comes from and how you can build this up in your understanding from first principles, combining sacred geometry and principles of the universe. So I think you'll enjoy that part. So, any questions online? Any questions in the peanut gallery? Any questions in the studio audience? No?
Nope.
No questions? Okay. We're going to be doing this for a while. Like I said, a couple, 3 months. This is not an easy subject. It doesn't have to be difficult. You just have to apply it and take it one step at a time. The emails that were sent out have a link if you feel inclined to make a donation to assist this work. Keep these things going forward.
When, Bonnie says, how best to study for next week?
How best to study for next week. If you have access to this book, the Practical Kabbalah Guidebook, there's a section in here, there's several in here. I'm going to be starting with, let Well, I'm not seeing it real. There's a discussion in here of the four worlds.
Four worlds.
It's also in the Dion Fortune book, which I just read again recently, except the new material. In Dion Fortune, chapter 9, well, start with chapter 8, the patterns of the tree, and then go into chapter 9, the 10 Sephiroth in the four worlds. There's something else earlier in here about the four worlds, but then there's a whole chapter on it. The four worlds of the Tree of Life correspond to the four suits in the Tarot. I mentioned there's this one-to-one correspondence. So I'm going to be starting with a little bit of the sacred geometry of where this is derived, which is some of the sacred geometry that produces the flower of life, and well as a lot of the symbolism that some of which you're going to be familiar with and some of it you are not. So next week will involve a little bit of geometry and a little bit of the four worlds, because before we get into the details of the suits and the four aspects of each sphere and the paths and the triads and the columns and the energy flows and all that, the four worlds is the most fundamental structure that overlays the Tree of Life. And so that is where we're going. So my goal is, like if you were to rewatch tonight's discussion, is to really grasp the concept that we're not talking about a religion, we're not talking about a spiritual tradition, we're talking about the core structure of the universe. This is the roadmap to the mind of God, and it is a roadmap to our own consciousness. And for you to do higher work that is in harmony and resonance with your divine will, you have to go inside. This is internal work, and you have to master the territory. So the purpose of this coursework in Quest of Self is to teach you the maps and the techniques of how to use it to go master your own territory. So we're going to be focusing first on the four worlds and also some basic geometry behind this. From there, depending on how long it takes us to get through that next week, then we're going to go more into the geometry and the basic structure. Then we're going to start dividing the tree up into easily understandable pieces. First the triads and the columns. Then we'll talk about each of the Sephiroth, and we're probably going to do the 22 paths last. And at each step of the way, we'll be talking about how to use this information practically. Theory is great as far as theory goes, but I remember in college, I was majoring in physics, but I had to take a lot of math. And I quickly found out that the math professors didn't know doodly squat about math or how to use it, especially how to use it. And I had thought, oh, maybe I could be a math major. I could have. But when I saw what their version of math was, I go, I ain't even going to touch this stuff. This is useless. And first day of the second semester of my second year in my sophomore year, Dr. Gunsel, physics professor, I learned more math from him in that one lecture of an hour and a half than I had in a year and a half in the math department.
That's
And that was another one of those little aha moments as I began to realize how truly messed up the educational system was. I don't think math departments should be allowed to teach math, at least not to physicists and engineers, because they don't know squat about physics and engineering. And physicists and engineers teach math the way it's actually used to produce something practical. Any other questions? Okay, if you're so inclined and you value this work and where it's going, please go to the Golden Eagle Discourses page and click the donate button. That's Toltec Shamanic Arts. Click, I think right at the bottom of the Toltec Shamanic Arts page, there's a donate button. So that's probably easier to remember. Toltec Shamanic Arts. There was also a link to that page in the email we sent out on the discussion notices. We appreciate that. It keeps the lights turned on. It keeps the energy flowing. So thank you in advance. All right, let's go offline, and we'll see everyone next week.
Thank you.